There he is. That's better. And let's just give you... we'll put your audio settings back up, Randy. So there we are. So now you need to stop swearing again, I'm afraid. So that's fine. So there's Randy, and as you can see, his stellar resume on the right-hand side of your screen. And I imagine in this next four, we might tilt more towards the bottom of the screen, where we talk about Magic R&D 1990-2007 and commentator for 60 plus Pro Tours. Let's find out as we go once more into Desert Island decks. And next on the list is, let's take a look. Next up we have Dave Price, Dead Guy Red, Wrath Block Constructed. Now, for those of you who don't know what Wrath Block was, well, that was Tempest Block Constructed, but Tempest was on the Plains of Wrath. Indeed, I think Plains of Wrath was actually a card or something. I don't know. But as you can see, it is an incredibly streamlined deck. Apart from two Wrathy Dragon over here and two Scalding Tongs over there, it is literally four of everything in sight. Randy, talk us through this deck and why have you chosen it?
Yeah, I just always found this to be such an elegant deck and such an elegant attack on that metagame. The Pro Tour was actually Tempest only, so it was a really constrained set of cards. And we wound up playing a mono green deck. Curse Scroll was legal, so you really wanted to have cheap cards and dump your hand and play Curse Scrolls. So we played Skyshroud Ranger to accelerate out 3-mana cards and Armadons. We actually had slivers in the decks, like Horn Slivers and Muscle Slivers and whatnot. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, I got top 16 at that Pro Tour, as did one of my teammates, so it felt like a good tournament, and I was playing for top 8 in the last round. But we knew about the mono red deck. Like, everybody had a mono red deck. Everybody had, Jackal Pup was obvious, Mog Fanatic was obvious. Of course, you put Curse Scrolls in that deck. The thing that really set Dave Price apart, and the reason he won this Pro Tour, on the one hand, this is the kind of deck that only has to play 20 lands. Whereas our green deck, we had to play 25 lands to really get to Curse Scrolls. And that ability, and he could keep a 1-mana draw, whereas we could not keep a 1-mana draw. So I just was always struck by how powerful it is to have a deck that gets to just have 40 threats instead of 35 and can keep a 1-mana draw instead of having to mulligan it. But the other thing that's going on here that's always just, stuck with me through the years, the mono red deck was the level 1 deck that everybody had. And what everybody did in testing for this Pro Tour is to put Bottle Gnomes in their deck. If your opponent plays turn 1 Jackal Pup and you just play your, one of your main deck Bottle Gnomes on turn 3, Jackal Pup sucks. Like, yeah, so Jackal Pup just watches and cries.
Right, because Bottle Gnomes is like a 1/3 body, first of all.
Yes.
And then you sacrifice it to gain 3 life.
Correct.
Oh, and by the way, we're living in a world of the stack.
But yeah, that wasn't super important. Living Death is also a little bit relevant, but it's mostly just the 1/3 body that can hold off Jackal Pups, and then the extra life that can stop you from getting burned out. So the thing the Team Dead Guy did, and Dave Price, whose teammates were Chris Pakula, who also ran this deck, do you see the answer? Do you see the metagame breaking innovation on this list?
Go on then.
Giant Strength.
Yeah, ridiculous. So that's a creature enchantment.
Yes.
That gives the creature +2/+2, and that is all, boys and girls. That is it.
2 mana. And it had been around for a while. It was actually reprinted in Tempest Block. 2 mana for +2/+2. Suddenly your Jackal Pup is a 4/3. And Bottle Gnomes is just I guess I can chump block once and gain the life. But that innovation, this was just a guy who was dedicated to beatdown. And he was playing mono red beatdown decks before any of these good Tempest cards were printed. He was attacking with Goblin Digging Team and Dwarven Soldier and just complete garbage creatures. But he was really pushing, how aggressive can you be? Somebody had to teach the world how to beat down, right? These were innovations. And, playing Magic in the 90s, people were just inventing whole new archetypes and whole new strategies. And Dave really just nailed this for this Pro Tour. And, part of it is that the card set lined up with what he was really good at. But part of it is just he built a better deck than anybody else. And you know what? He got to win the Pro Tour.
Yeah, he certainly did. I want to ask you, Dave Price is someone that I always associated with mono red. Now,
sure.
Partly that's going to be the media at work, partly that's, hey, if you go and win a Pro Tour, it doesn't matter what you play at Friday Night Magic or its equivalent 3 weeks later, because no one's seeing that, they're seeing this. But it is definitely true that in the early days of the game, there were people who you could put on a deck pretty reliably, certainly you could put on a style of deck very reliably, And I'm not sure that's quite as true anymore. I mean, obviously, Andrew Cuneo is still saying draw go to as many people as he can find willing to sit there while he does it. But what has changed over the years to mean that there are no longer. Like, I can't name you 6 pros, I don't think, who I can say, here's your mono red guy, here's your mono white guy, here's your blue white control guy, here's your combo guy. They kind of don't really exist anymore. Why not?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about it a ton. I mean, they exist a little bit, right? Queg Wesco is always going to be on a white weenie. Andrew's going to
Right?
be on the control deck if it's at all remotely viable.
Uh huh.
He did play Infect at the last PT, though. I mean, he's got some range.
Some range, yes.
Um, no, it's an interesting question.
Well, we'll open it up to the chat. I'm sure people will have a view, and maybe we'll have a round table about that. Why are people less specialised than they used to be? Maybe they can't afford to be anymore. Maybe you just have to nail yourself down to the best deck because the edges just aren't there now.
I mean, some of it is also that back in the day, like if you got really good at an archetype, you were inventing it. Dave was inventing tech that nobody else had. And at this point, the pros are in some level, it's, the whole thing about standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Newton was able to be a great physicist because he had Galileo to come before him and sort of, figure some of that stuff out. So there's just a lot more understanding about how magic works and what matters nowadays that you can sort of learn from. Whereas at the time, we were just inventing it.
So that's David Price with Dead Guy Red, the Wrath Block constructed Pro Tour champion. With that, let's move on to deck 6 of 8 for Randy, and it is this. It's from Bob Marr Jr., Pro Tour Chicago 1999. The format is extended, and this is an Oath of Druids deck. In terms of creatures, well, there are only 3. There's a Shard Phoenix, a Morphling, and a Spike Feeder where my head used to be. And then an absolute mountain of spells. But, I mean, just compare and contrast this list, Randy, with the one that's just gone before, in terms of, we looked at that 4 pair of 2s, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And here, there's the mana base alone has 3 singletons. All the creatures are singletons. There are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 singleton spells in the deck. Just what kind of skill set is needed to pilot a deck like this? And for goodness sake, what does it do?
I mean, the Oath of Druids is the key to this deck. The reason it's got a lot of one-ofs is that you can tutor and fetch them up, right? Dave's mono-red deck, there's no card drawing. There's no selection. You're just drawing off the top of the deck and playing what you get, so you want as much consistency as possible. But this is an Enlightened Tutor deck. 4 copies of Enlightened Tutor allow you to go get whatever, the 1 Aura of Silence, the 1 Abundance, whatever you happen to need. Obviously, the Oath of Druids is the most important card, but Bob only has to run 2 of them. The deck is named after it. The deck only functions because of Oath of Druids, but Enlightened Tutor means he only needs a couple of them. And then he's even got the ability to fetch out the 1 of lands. The floodplains are sort of the old school fetch lands. Coming to play tapped, but that's all we had to work with. We had real dual lands to fetch, so it all kind of worked out in the end.
So why did you choose this deck for your Desert Island decks?
I mean, for me, I chose this deck because it was really one of the first really fun matches I commentated on. The finals of this Pro Tour Chicago, this is Maher versus Brian Davis. It's just... I mean, it's really one of the most fun matches I ever got to call. And, Bob winds up winning that Pro Tour. If you want to go back and watch early Pro Tour coverage, this has got to be one of the things on the short list of matches to go back and watch. Just Bob outplays him, and there's all these just crazy dramatic swings. And I was paired in the booth with Brian Hacker, who was just on fire. I mean, I think it's just the highlight of Hacker's career as a commentator. So, I mean, for me, I look at this deck, and it's all about that match, and it's all about me making this transition from being a player to being a commentator. And, it happened to line up with basically when I went inside Wizards of the Coast as well. This is the first PT Chicago I didn't play in, so I was there casting, and yeah, no, that match was just a lot of fun, and I still go back and watch it from time to time. One of the highlights of my career as a commentator, I think.
A lot of people who make things happen in life do so because they can glimpse a future in whatever their chosen field is. So, in 1999, I'm sitting there in the top 8 of Pro Tour London with headphones on, listening to you commentate, and you're watching Bob Marr play in the final of Pro Tour Chicago in 1999, and you just got your feet under the door at Wizards, and here you are commentating. We're 16 years on from that now. Did you have any sense of where Magic coverage in the widest sense would be heading in that intervening time?
I mean, not in the details. what I knew is that, my sort of home base within the game was the Pro Tour. I mean, for me, my way of viewing Magic was through the lens of being a competitive player, being a spike, trying to figure out what the cards can do. Now, I mean, as a developer, you have to have more perspective than that. You have to understand that the game is a lot of things to a lot of different players. But I always felt grounded by just understanding what's going on in the Pro Tour. So for me, commentary, it wasn't so much that I saw everything that was going to become a Pro Tour commentary. And no, I didn't see Twitch coming and, all the matches getting streamed. It's awesome. But for me, it was I wanted to stay in touch with the Pro Tour scene. I wanted to keep going to all the events. I wanted to make sure that I still understood what the good cards were and how the good players were winning, what was broken, what wasn't broken, what was fair. So for me, it was a lot about just trying to keep that perspective and keep centered on, the way that I had gotten good at the game and what had sort of given me the insights that led R&D to want to hire me in the first place. Right. So, I mean, for me, commentary was, it started out anyway, and certainly at this point in my career, it was an excuse to keep going to all the Pro Tours. And it was kind of fun. It's only in the last, I don't know, couple of years, actually, that it's become, more of the main course for me in terms of Magic.
Right, sure. Okay, so that's Bob Marr. You can check that match out. I'm sure that's on either Wizards or YouTube somewhere. Pro Tour Chicago YouTube. 99 on YouTube. So on we go. And next up, we have this deck, which looks much cleaner and quieter. And this is Brian Kibler's The Red Zone, quote, PT Chicago 2000, it's standard, and as you can see, there's a lot of little green men and bigger green men running around. You've got Birds of Paradise, Lanoir Elso, all the mana acceleration you could want, River Boas, which had Island Walk, 2/1 Island Walk that regenerated, Blastoderm, the 5/5 that had counters coming off, Ancient Hydra was huge, Jade Leech was huge, and a couple of dragons down there, if I get my head out of the way, 2 Rith the Awakener, and then 4 Chimeric Idol, 4 Armageddon, and 3 Waxwayne. So, what's going on with this deck?
So when I got to Wizards, the first set that I got to work on was Invasion. And this Pro Tour Chicago 2000, was the first Pro Tour where Invasion was legal. Mm-hmm. So for me, this was the first Pro Tour that had cards I had a hand in making. And that was just awesome. I mean, it was every bit as spectacular as you can imagine it is, that, this game that you sort of grew up caring about, you have this dream job, and now people are playing with the cards that you helped to make. And so that piece of it was already kind of awesome. But then the real thing that we were trying to do with Invasion, I mean, a lot of the push, the transition, make the spells worse, make the creatures better. We touched on this earlier, right? Can we get people to just play big creatures? Can you actually make the creatures good enough that people are going to attack and block rather than just memory jar, Megrim shenanigans? And look at this deck. Rith the Awakener made the cut. This was kind of the dream. This is what we were hoping we could do. A lot of this tournament, too, this deck doesn't have it, but Fires of Yavimaya, which was in Invasion, was the real defining card of this format.
Right.
Some of it was the synergy with the Masks block fading cards like Blastoderm and Saproling Burst, but some of it was just being able to attack quickly with big monsters like Jade Leech or like Rith the Awakener. And, I mean, for me, the most memorable moment of the entire Pro Tour was Brian Kibler. He's playing against John Finkel, and he's got Rith the Awakener out, but that's not good enough. He enchants Rith the Awakener with the Armadillo Cloak that had come in from the sideboard, and Kibler destroys John Finkel with Armadillo Cloaked Rith the Awakener.
Yeah, and that's what's meant to happen on turn 8 of a pre-release.
No, it happened in the Pro Tour.
I know.
I forget if it was.
Well, exactly.
It was either playing for top 8 or in the quarterfinals. I forget which, but I mean, it was a huge match.
Yeah.
Late. Kibler makes top 8 with this deck, and once again, some guy named Kai wins, but that's not the important part of the story.
It's never the important part of the story, obviously.
It happened all the time.
Incidentally, I can tell you, someone in the chat just says, "Wait, can I just check? Is that an 8 mana sorcery in the sideboard?" And yes, it is.
It is.
That's an Obliterate. Yeah,
absolutely.
So none of these deck lists with all these 1 and 2 casting cost instants where you just never did anything on your turn. This is the absolute antithesis of that. It's like, yeah, I've got to 8, turn them all sideways, Obliterate. Now what? Yeah, my goodness, man.
And this is where Kibler gets the nickname Dragon Master. It was that act of Armadillo Cloak on the Rift to beat John Finkel at the end of the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
He's been the Dragon Master ever since.
Yep, absolutely outstanding. One of the giants of the game intersecting here with Randy Buehler's Desert Island decks. Let's move on, and we get to now... Yes, this is where we finish. We finish with Craig Jones Zoo Pro Tour Honolulu 2006 in Standard. I think I have some idea why you may have chosen this deck for your Desert Island decks, but do tell, Randy, how come?
I, so I had two reasons. I mean, on the one hand, yes, this is the deck with my favorite individual call of my entire commentary career. The Lightning Helix off the top to win the semifinals. It was just one of those moments where you're in the booth, and I mean, you're always obviously always trying to translate the drama, and I'm always looking for like, what's the hook? Why do people care about this match? What's the thing that I can sort of shed light on to make everybody sort of get what's going on here? And it's one of those where I'm actually arguing with Mike Flores, and I see this line where Mike's trying to figure out, he should kill. It's Olivier Ruel. He should kill all these creatures. I'm like, no, look, the only way he's going to actually win this game, you char his face, knock the top of your deck. You have to draw another burn spell straight off the top. And so I'm articulating this, and then I can tell that Craig has indeed adopted this plan, and Olivier figures it out, and they just windmill slam the card, and it's the Lightning Helix, it's the burn spell. I mean, I felt like I was able to capture that moment and turn it into this big exciting thing, and it's become the top deck of the century. So very proud of that call. That's not the only reason I chose this deck, though. The other thing that I really like in looking back on this deck, so this is Ravnica era standard. And Ravnica, talked about it, how Invasion was the first set that I got to work on. Ravnica was the first set where it wasn't me specifically on the development teams. It was a team of people that I had hired using a bunch of processes that I had helped build. So this is me as director of Magic R&D. I sort of, the job that Aaron Forsythe has was essentially invented so that I could have it first. And, this is me sort of, I don't know, as a manager of a team, as a guy who was helping to sort of build a department and build processes and bring in people, I just felt really good about how awesome Ravnica turned out. And, I didn't have to do all the work myself. We at that point built a team and built a department that, I don't know, I like to think that I was able to do enough good work when I was in R&D that I'm still sort of helping the game make better, even though I don't work for Wizards anymore. So, I mean, for me, Ravnica was sort of the peak of that, sort of the management half of my career at Wizards.
Right, and also, I mean, yes, there was this deck, but the whole of that Pro Tour was fantastic in terms of the constructed decks that were around. I mean, I don't think I'm imagining things, but isn't subsequent Invitational winner, Snapcaster Mage, Tiago Chan, wasn't he playing Owling Mine in that?
Yes,
And he
indeed.
like made the semi-finals by beating Antoine Ruel in the quarters, right? I think
Yeah, and
that's
Mark
true.
Herberholz ends up winning it, beats Craig in the finals with a Beach House deck, Beach House Beatdown, something like that.
Right. I mean, there were
Kesey
just
Street.
that's right, Heasy Street, and there were just so many great cards in that Pro Tour. So those are the 8 decks. Now, Randy, you're still a huge part of Magic right now. Obviously, we're going to hook up in person in just 2 weeks from now. We'll both be in Brussels for the Pro Tour.
Mm-hmm.
How it's going to be standard. That's the main constructed format going on. We've also got, of course, Dragons of Tarkir, Fate Reforged Draft. Very preliminary stages. Any sense of what we should be starting to look for if we're going to go and play at F&M this Friday, for example? What's
Chaos.
right?
Look for chaos. There are so many cards in Dragons, and Standard was already kind of wide open, and there were already a whole bunch of different things you can do. And now the Dragons cards don't really just slot elegantly into the old decks and make them better. It's just whole new decks doing whole new different things, attacking the metagame from whole new different directions. I honestly don't know yet what's going to happen. I get 2 weeks before I have to figure it out, right, boss?
Yes, you do.
All
Absolutely.
right.
We'll
I'll
look
try
forward.
to know what I'm talking about by the time we get to Brussels. But right now,
Yeah.
I just look for chaos.
Yeah, Friday lunchtime. You get to tell us everything that's going to happen. That
I'll be
seems,
ready.
seems fair. Meanwhile, they can catch the Gauntlet of Greatness. Tomorrow is the final, but they can also go back and watch all the previous runs on a playlist. VSL, am I right that last night was the penultimate weekend of the season? Regular
Yeah,
season?
last night was week 8 of a
Right.
9-week regular season,
Yep.
and oh my god, the games last night. The games last night were insane. I won't spoil anything.
Yep.
Just saying, if you ever want to go back and watch some VSL, this would be an excellent week to go check out some games.
It absolutely would. So do that. We look forward to seeing Randy at the Pro Tour in a couple of weeks. One of the true giants of the game, whether it's at the playing field, in the commentary booth, inside R&D. As I say, when the history of the game comes to be written, this man is going to be a central part because His imprint is all over this game. We all love. Randy, thank you so much for
Thank
giving
you.
us your time, especially early in the morning. I know that you're, like so many of our Seattle friends, on the far side of the United States, so it's still early in the morning for you. Thanks for being on the show. Great insight as ever. Thank you very much, my friend, and I will see you in Brussels in a couple of weeks. And that was the Desert Island X of Mr. Randy Buehler.